I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Lindsay.
And this is a webisode of NingyoBINGO where you keep collecting dolls.
And Becca steals my line for the intro.
That's because I keep going to the cons.
I know, and normally I'm never on the webisodes. This is the first one I'm on.
Right, well, so do the other half.
Oh gosh, I never do Becca's half. I have enough problems remembering my part.
Okay, where you keep collecting dolls.
Let's see, what does Becca always say every single time? Right, but you never win the game.
Except when you get your Grail Doll.
Well, is it really winning?
You win, your wallet loses.
But does it really ever end?
It doesn't, which is why you never win the game. But
and that's why we're going to spend today talking a little bit about the concept of the Grail Doll and what that means specifically within the BJD hobby. Because I think it's an idea that we have in this very small subsection of doll collecting hobbyists that doesn't exist quite the same way for other people in different hobbies.
Yeah, I mean, I know you collect Figma also.
I collect specific Figma, but I have that problem, yes.
Have you ever really heard of the term Grail outside of the doll hobby?
It's not really a term that I've ever really seen. And even lately, like, I've seen posts on Den of Angels where people are going, what's a Grail Doll?
Yeah,
what makes a Grail Doll? Am I allowed to call this a Grail Doll?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sort of confusion where the term really grew out of some of the early period of the English-speaking hobby. Yes. And I don't think it's even really it's not like a word that's been like brought back or translated over into the Japanese hobby.
No. So this idea of a Grail Doll came about because, well, things were limited in the day, and like 1999 to 2003, the infancy of the hobby, we had what was commonly formed by folks as the way, in which there was standard releases and limited releases, and the sculpts therein did not overlap, unlike Apple House nowadays, which usually releases
like a new sculpt or a new body type as a limited release to drive up interest, but you can still buy it as a regular release afterwards.
Right, without all the accoutrement, maybe not without the same skin tone or things
especially
like that.
The deep skin tones at Apple House, and even soon, like, they'll do special darker skin tones because they know there's a special interest for it.
Right.
Specifically for a special limited release to drive up interest and excitement. And then they'll usually offer them afterwards in sort of a normal range of their normal skin tones that are easy for them to produce. Though Volks today still separates these two things, but most other companies don't.
Yes, and one of the early examples I can think of a Grail Doll that was specific to skin tone was a lot of the Lutz Delfs, for more on that.
The olden days.
They did tan versions on a lot of them. So on a lot of those, you could see there was the Miu L Lishy,
the classic triad.
They released those all in tan skins, which may, depending on the year, might have turned yellow or beauty green. But the point being is that they were a Grail Doll because they were hard to obtain on top of you wanting them.
And we're not just talking about hard to obtain in terms of money. Money is always a problem in our hobby. Yes. We even talk about it in our intro that Becca stole from me. And look, I've got a bit. I'm going to stick with the bit as long as I can. So other than just money, monetarily being hard to reach, it was restricted in a way that we don't see as much nowadays because of how opened up the hobby is to international customers with most companies, I'm looking at you, Volks, is that it's easy to obtain dolls either through a distributor or through group orders or through people who have made it their job to make it easy to access them now.
Yes.
But if we flash back 10 or 15 years to the infancy of the hobby, where importation of goods from Asian countries was hard to begin with, and people weren't quite understanding why you wanted to do so, and all the sort of postal systems weren't there, and there were a lot of language barriers as well involved in trying to access any of these dolls, which were really focused in Asia and produced over there. We didn't have the native, like, homegrown artists that we have today.
Right. And if you wanted a Volks doll, like the original Volks doll, so 1999 through 2000, you were going through somebody you knew or a shopping service specifically for the doll from Japan and you were paying a premium. So they were...
Like a huge premium.
So imagine that on top of it being a limited or something like that.
And the dolls themselves weren't made in the volumes that they are today either.
Correct.
Even now, Volks knows that lots of people want their limiteds, and it's still cutthroat trying to obtain them.
Correct. So back in the day, it was not only a cost that was a factor, but the fact that it was like a limited item, and many of the limited items were original sculpts. So if that sculpt was your visual aesthetic and your dream vision that you were trying to achieve, it became a somewhat unattainable grail, a la Indiana Jones.
And the Holy Grail.
Yes.
Do we want to cut here? You just show up. You're just now in the hat.
Okay.
So that'll be a cut we'll make in the video. That's fine.
No hat.
No
I mean,
hat.
it's too goofy.
Right.
It's too goofy. Sorry,
Right.
guys. We're thinking about it. We're not going to do it.
Well, you can do a nice jump cut before me smudging again. We can roll on.
Or we could kind of do Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail, and then we can come back in.
This is true. Like a small clip that won't get us sued.
Right. Just like we're mentioning it. It's coming back. Yeah. So the reason why this entire thing came up as a really great topic to go into is because, number one, I saw the question on Facebook recently, which made me realize that, this term that has become so intrinsic in the doll hobby as to understanding what water in an egg is, isn't universally understood across different hobbies. And also, I got a
Grail doll recently.
Yes.
Usually we talk about in the beginning of our episodes a little bit of what's been happening recently in the hobby and in our lives. And recently in Becca's life. So, okay, here's story time. Becca has had as her desktop background for at least 5 years?
Probably.
5 years. A beautiful picture of the Karina?
Yes.
Karina sculpt by Ippelhaus.
And through a friend, I had an opportunity to purchase her and adopt her. And I have, wholeheartedly.
So Becca has managed to find a Grail doll, and it really means it's very, pertinent to ourselves, because in a lot of ways I started collecting with my Grail doll, and that kind of is a weird place to begin for a lot of people.
No, actually, I think it's the place where a lot of people begin. If you could pass me Tempest here.
Alright, give me a minute. The doll that started it all. Really.
Pretty much. So Tempest ended up being one of my original Grail dolls, and reobtaining her became a journey into things as well, because, for me at the time she was unobtainable, and then suddenly was obtainable. A Grail doll sometimes is just simply your first doll into the hobby nowadays. I don't think I would have termed her as a Grail doll. I would have just termed her as the doll I wanted. I didn't anticipate them being like potato chips.
Nobody ever does. We never realize that what you're getting into is slightly addictive, as we've talked about in previous podcast episodes about the cycle addictive things.
I won't say it's addictive. It can be addictive. I will say it's satisfying to continue.
Yeah, there is a type of addiction that's shopping addiction, which is a thing that the hobby does have to be somewhat aware of, but that's a whole nother shenanigans.
Right. This is just satisfying to continue. So Tempest was my first, and
what made her? For me, when we're talking about a Grail doll, I feel like we need to sort of define a little bit about what we're talking about, because lots of people don't quite understand what Grail means.
Well,
and I feel there is, like you're saying initially, Tempest, you would have described her not as a Grail doll, but as the doll you wanted.
Right.
But why do we use the term Grail? What is the investment in a Grail?
So the idea of a Grail is something that is very, very fulfilling, but very, very hard or impossible to achieve.
And I think that's a key to the Grail doll sort of term in the hobby, is that there's no way I can get this, but there's a small chance, maybe, that I can maybe obtain it.
Like good luck nowadays if your Grail doll is one of the original cheese.
And we're talking about the one of the earliest Volks doing a doll that was a release in partnership and the likeness of an existing property.
Yeah, so that was that. So Karina ended up being, actually, when I sold Lishy, and Lish, whatever, and I attempted to reshell her. She was one of the ones I was considering, because I fell in love with the sculpt, and I lived on that website during my college years when this was going to be released, and
Apple House's website.
And I bemoaned my inability to get it, and it was primarily because I was a college student, and this doll at the time was around circa $300 or so.
Something like that.
$300 to $400 depending on sales, and if you got an event head you could resell.
It was sort of defrayed cost.
Yes.
And event heads will become part of our story shortly.
These guys, blank, Apple House, Elder Apple House doll, start around the $600 mark.
And they were also one of the first companies to really enter into this type of proportions, as we have them right next to each other. The Lish here, that is the Tempest of today, she is very classic in the early doll hobby aesthetics. And even in that early doll hobby, this one was considered a fairly mature sculpt. Like, you could put onto her a fairly mature attitude more easily than a lot of the other feminine sculpts that were out there.
Yes.
Whereas then Apple House comes along and we have, like, dem thighs.
Yeah. she
dem thighs, dat chest. Like, she's very voluptuous. Her proportions are very different, even though there are different size ranges.
And stylistically, they're very, very different. Where the Delphs and fairylands of the land have very exaggerated features, stylized features.
Yeah. Large eyes, smaller mouths.
Apple House has a lot more realistic features, which was kind of a new ground for the hobby. After Apple House went, Delph did their model line, and
their model line's a bit more adult. That they're still sticking with the same head sculpts.
Well, it was the Fairyland. It was more of a model doll size, so it was more like that. There was an interesting. That's almost a whole other episode.
But the point being is that there was an essence for both of these dolls for you of unattainability.
Yes.
Which created a sort of distance between you and the doll, almost.
Yeah, and reobtaining Tempest actually made her a Grail doll. The first time wasn't a Grail doll, but by the point where they were getting discontinued and I had to find her again, then suddenly she was a Grail.
So what went into that made it different? How did Tempest, the original, which was a Lish, bought directly from Let's, if I remember correctly?
She changed from a standard release to something that was being discontinued.
So there's something there about the sudden fear. I'll never have this, maybe.
Yeah.
There was a difference there for you.
Because I could see somebody saying that's my Grail doll, and it's a limited doll on a website that's a pre-release.
Right.
Because there's still the understanding that if you don't go now, you ain't gonna.
So there's definitely, in the BJD hobby specifically, when we're talking about a Grail doll, the difference between falling in love with something, like one, and really wanting it and those emotions, there's something very different when we start using the word Grail.
Yeah. So speaking of emotions, she's interesting because my Grail version of her was in one of the darker skin tones.
Which, again, is more limited and harder to obtain.
Yes, though right now, not as much as it used to be, but it's getting better. But when I was able to purchase her from a friend, I jumped at the opportunity because I've always wanted Karina, and I would never get this opportunity again.
I think that's another thing.
Not for this cost, anyway.
There's, as we've talked about multiple times in the hobby, there's something in the hobby about the hunt, which we have mentioned multiple times, and I think it's very key to collectors, is this feeling of searching after something, and the things you have to go through to obtain it, making the object more special than it would have been if you could just buy it outright, even if they were the exact same item.
Yeah, and I mean, when I stumbled upon this decision, it was like I was in front of like one of those cartoon holes, and I looked into the hole.
Wile E. Coyote style, slam down.
Right, and I'm sitting at the edge of the hole, and I'm looking down, and I'm like, okay,
with the same sense of vertigo.
Yeah, like, okay, this is exciting. This is exactly what I wanted, except the skin tone's different. Is this worth it? Am I gonna be happy? I don't know. Jump!
And then there's the adrenaline rush, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
There's an adrenaline rush and an endorphin rush about taking a chance. It's like, you know what? It's sounding more and more like how people talk about gambling.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's the nice thing about Grail dolls and limited dolls and things like that is if I don't love it, somebody else will.
That's true. And that's another thing that we can talk about is the failed Grail doll. Yeah. When you think it's the thing that you really want, and I think sometimes we get tricked into the unattainability of something, where it becomes an objective simply because it's hard. And it's more satisfying to go after something that is hard to get than something that's easy to get. For example, for me, as we kind of have made into a running joke, there's a specific Volks limited edition for me.
Amy Ayase,
which is normally not a doll I would like, to be honest. She's bigger than the range I prefer. She's more feminine than I tend to prefer in my female sculpts. However, it's become a thing with me now. Because every time she appears, because she's hard to get, but there's still that small chance where I might be able to obtain her, that I've become sort of hyper-focused on it. Because it's hard to obtain, and I never quite have the money and the opportunity at the same time, and the Volks lotteries are hard to get into, and I tried twice for her, it didn't work out. That whole process sort of makes it a bit more maddening. And now I almost want her for the sake of defeating the difficulty or to complete the task because it's difficult.
Achievement unlocked. It might show up on your PlayStation account.
Yeah, no, exactly. If I had one, which would be great. But, like, there's this thing into that where, like, I think the day that I would be able to obtain an Amy Ayase, which is kind of why I haven't been trying too hard lately, is the day I'll be disappointed with her.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my fears with the Karina when she got here. I had a nightmare.
You had a nightmare? Oh no! I had a nightmare.
I literally had this nightmare, and it was a combo nightmare between me not knowing where to go because I was on vacation. It's always my job to give directions, and I couldn't figure out my way back to the hotel. And also me not knowing what to do with this doll because I had her. She looks really great in a purple wig. And I was trying to figure out her identity because right now she's dressed up as Esmeraldas, which is great, but it's not my original intention for her. It was for her to be put into the, oh my gosh, we need to do a whole thing on doll families and plots.
Oh goodness gracious, like the whole, that feeds into, we've talked about before how with a collection, you collect things, it's satisfying when there's like a theme to them because it feels complete and containable and something that you can control. Yeah, so
Karina was supposed to be related to this gal, which is my F21, and it's entirely buried in her Halloween outfit at the moment. But her...
why don't we just take off her hat?
Okay.
So we can see her face, and we can kind of sort of get a feeling for why it doesn't feel satisfying to you with Karina.
So this girl is in Sunlight Skin.
Which is, if you're not familiar with Volk's term, Sunlight Skin is their sort of version of a duskier, sort of darker skin tone.
Which is the darkest skin tone you can get outside of SD16s at the moment for
ebony.
A regular sort of release. Yeah.
They have an ebony skin that's darker, but this is their tan.
And she was supposed to be related to her.
And if you haven't picked it up because of the lighting or how the camera's picking it up, the Karina that Becca has finally obtained is a white-skinned doll.
In fact, she's whiter than my Lishi, who is white-skinned, because my Lishi has yellowed, ivory, whatever you want to call it. Ivory sounds nicer.
I personally like ivory. I have my boy, who is currently very ivory, is right here, kind of hovering in the background. And I personally like him. But we'll bring them out when we're talking about my problem.
We'll bring your problem to the front.
Goddamn. Well, let's finish talking about your problem here first. Is that there's the Grail Doll and there's the Hunt, which can kind of almost trick you with the adrenaline rush into maybe jumping into things you're not ready for. Like, I feel like sense of a gamble with a doll is integral to the Grail Doll image.
Yes.
It's the idea that when the opportunity comes up to get the Grail Doll, it's always a very iffy situation, a 50-50. Might I get it? Might I not? Might I ever see this again? That's very integral to make a Grail Doll different from other terms that we use.
Yes. And I've chosen this moment to realize that I have not changed that from the directional to the omni, but I don't know if it'll match here.
We'll find out and see if we have to do this all over again.
Yeah, I'm talking about the microphone, guys.
Don't worry about it. We are figuring out how this works with two people in a small space.
This is my first video where I've actually attempted to, like, make things pretty for you guys. Like, well, pretty.
We're trying.
Normal. And anyway, so Are we done with my problem?
No, we're not quite done with your problem.
Oh, God, no.
Is that because there's this gambling situation with the Grail Doll, sometimes you'll leap at something because maybe this is the only chance you'll get anything like this as an opportunity, such as a white-skinned Karina instead of waiting around for maybe a tan to come up in a similar situation, because you don't know if that'll happen.
Yeah, right now I'm attempting to save for both the holidays and for the aforementioned Nier Automata Dolphy Dream 2B, and saving for that $600 doll does not also...
But would you call the Nier doll a Grail doll?
No.
See? It's not about. It's not really about not having money. There's something that plays into it.
I wouldn't
it's
call
availability.
I feel like they're gonna release her, and there's gonna be enough of them. I feel like they're gonna release her similar to Miku. That's my bet.
And Miku's been endlessly re-released.
And they also did a pre-order where they said everybody that pre-orders is getting one.
Yeah.
And the other reason why she's not is that these are characters that I create in Shell.
Yeah.
And
Shell, for those of you not familiar, this is your first time hearing the word.
Oh my god, that has to be a whole other episode.
Very quickly, Shell means that you have a character image in your mind, and the shell is the sculpt that you feel will best suit it. And characters can change shells or basically change dolls depending on how things work out.
Think about Ghost in the Shell and Makoto, and you know how she
changed
bodies at the end.
Sort of term.
Yeah.
We can go into what shelling is and what that means to the hobby in a different episode.
Oh god, that can be a one whole.
We say this all the time. We're like, man, we should write this down and remember this is an episode when we're talking about new episodes.
Whoops. But so therein lies the thing where I know I'll like her and she'll be cool, but I don't gain personal satisfaction and love for a doll by simply buying it complete.
Right.
Her, I gain satisfaction from creating the doll in an image that I see.
For you, the investment of your own personal creativity is where the doll becomes yours.
Yeah, you're leaning. Sorry.
I have to lean. I have to be the cool guy. I gotta lean.
We'll lean on that.
I'll lean on the thing you guys can't see. It'll be fine.
Right.
Who needs my hand? We don't need my hand.
That isn't leaning against the thing that has the microphone on it. Yeah.
Expensive microphone on it. We're gonna just
not,
casually move this table.
Yeah,
All right.
okay, cool.
Back to going.
Yeah.
All right. We're fine. I'm not going to destroy anything anymore.
Are we onto your problem yet?
I think we might be onto my problem.
Okay.
So as we so there's a lot that goes into the Grail Doll, and I think a lot of it is the impulse, is that it has to be sort of impulsive when the chance comes up because it's transient and temporary. And for me, getting into the hobby, there had always been a sculpt I went back and forth on, and this was the at the edge of the pool, not quite ready to jump into the deep end sort of situation.
And then they discontinued it. So availability was the key factor here.
Exactly. So for me, I've been looking at the Delph Moon, which was a relatively unpopular sculpt. And it was the limited edition version that they released to sort of present the new sculpt of the moon head never sold out.
Limited Delph the Moon.
The one with the redemption. Moon Redemption. When he had like the black and silver hair. It was not a particularly well designed, like, limited.
It was just kind of like dark punky.
It was dark punky, but it wasn't even an interesting dark punky. So like the limited was always around, and the limited came with the two different sleeping heads, and all sorts of things happened with that. And there's been a long time where I'd look at it and I'm like, okay, well this is like, I don't know why I like this weirdo doll that nobody else particularly likes, but I like the weirdo doll that no one else particularly likes. And I'd always eyed it up, and whenever I saw it in person, I really loved it. And then Lutz was like, we sell our sculpts forever. And then what happened, Becca?
Then Cerberus Project said, YOLO, and left.
And took all their skulls with them, which suddenly discontinued what was certain, for a short period of time, a sure thing. Anytime I wanted to enter the hobby, anytime I finally had the money for it, I was in college, you don't have any money when you're in college, and suddenly they were gone.
We just took it for granted because we thought the Delphs would be around forever, just like who could imagine not being able to order a Megu from Volks?
Yeah, exactly. Which today is no longer really possible.
Yeah, it's no longer the standard release, but you can still get her
limited,
full custom service.
Which is also a very limited thing.
I still do that.
The Volks
custom versus choice.
Yes.
Yeah, I would do that. Okay,
but cue a little while later, Becca is gesturing ferociously at the doll behind me, but I have a doll to this side, it's a little bit easier to grab. And we all know where my story goes.
Yes, so one became two, became twins.
And I'd always been very taken with the idea of twins.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who lived close to me in college and home who had a set of Delph Moon twins, would you imagine? Which was basically Lindsay got to look at all of her posts way back on live journal.
I loved her photography. I still do.
Live journal.
Shout out to Bjoken for having beautiful dolls and beautiful photography and beautiful things that you share with us on the internet.
Yes. So Lindsay got to see this visual.
And I have a thing about symmetry. Like, it's not just that Bjoken had twins, so I wanted twins. It feeds into all my worst and most horrible and most self-indulgent aesthetics.
Yeah.
Humanly possible.
Yeah. You're doing the thing.
God damn it. Now YouTube's not gonna let us load this because I cursed. So, anyway.
I can bleep it out, whatever.
Quite little belief. Anyway, so for me, it was the moment that they were not obtainable that this transformed into the first doll I would probably want into a Grail doll.
Yeah, so...
There was a distinct change in my relationship to the doll for me.
At first it was a want, and then it became, oh god, what now?
That gambling thing came back into it, where the chances of being able to obtain it had shrunk dramatically. Which turned it from someday I'll save up and I'll be able to afford a doll into I have to look for this. And I might never obtain one. And I think that change made me look for it much harder.
Yeah. The same thing happened with my Lishy and Tempest because, well, yes. I was first trying different sculpts for her. I even bought and sold a body that was a different size body.
Yep.
And in the end, I'm like, nope, go back to the original because I actually had a dream where I dreamed about her in that body. And, like,
this really talks about the emotional investment people put into these things.
It works on your subconscious, undoubtedly.
It's an obsessive little hamster wheel in the back of your mind that you end up always thinking about in some level when you're thinking about dolls and things you want to purchase and what you're looking for. And what happened to you, Becca, happened to me, is that you were talking about, maybe I want to go back to the leash because you weren't happy with it originally as a body, and then Lutz discontinued it.
Yeah.
We both suffered a very similar problem.
Yeah, because we were both very into Cerberus projects, sculpting, because they were a little bit more mature. And more in your price
standard. Range. There was an aesthetic to them that was very popular and common in the hobby at the time. And lo and behold, Becca one day was like, she is evil. She sent me these links every time she found something related to the moon sculpt on Den of Angels secondhand shops that was like a reasonable price. She's like, look, Lindsay, there's a head.
It's called enabling. That's almost another entire episode.
But this is where the twist in the story comes for me in particular, which is just sort of an illustration of how the journey for the Grail doll turns into a story for yourself. It becomes part of your own narrative of your life. This isn't a moon.
Yeah, so the ones she ended up getting were some of the event heads that came out.
I guess we'll bring him forward since he's actually standing and it's easier to look at.
Yeah.
So we can see them together
and
have a purple problem.
Because these are... Yeah, he's leaning forward.
He's not in a great stand for him.
They're
old Delphs that haven't been strung recently.
And have they been wired yet?
No.
What the hell are we doing?
I don't know. I am very slow. But the point being, these two, which there's a story behind this one, which someday we'll just do story time with each other and we'll tell the stories that we have about our dolls and the shenanigans involved in getting them.
Yeah.
But we're already sort of running along on what our plans were anyway. But these aren't moons.
Yeah, they're either summer or winter event heads.
I think they are summer event heads, which I can tell you what they are if I check my Den of Angels profile, where I wrote it down because I don't remember the name of it, the sculpt easily. But these were limited edition heads.
I believe they were from Fairyland when they first opened.
No, this was still in Lutz.
Oh, was it?
This was a Lutz. It's 2009, old. And
so you're after we graduated.
So Becca finds them, and they're essentially the moon sculpt with elf ears. There's slight differences in the faces from the moon, but they're essentially the moon with elf ears. And because the moon was unpopular, it is hard to find it.
Yes, because there's less in the secondhand marketplace when you get to buying them secondhand.
And those who do buy it love them, so they tend to hold on to them.
Especially at this point, if you were looking for them now, you'd be hard
pressed to actually find them anymore. Yeah. Which is part of the story, is that I settled for second best. And like Becca did.
Yeah, hopefully. I think
and trust me, don't get me wrong, elf ears, I am here for you. Every doll I own has elf ears. All 3 of them. Minus the dragon. And
he has horns.
It's an aesthetic. I'm not upset about it. But I settled because it was the second best thing to the dream of what I wanted because I didn't think I could obtain it anymore.
And
then we have another thing off screen.
Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. This is
Phil.
Gets something from off screen. Shuffle.
Still in the original box because they were sort of a guilty purchase. After I'd already bought these boys, and I'd always told myself, I'm going to buy one. I'm going to buy one doll, and I'll just be one size, and it'll be fine. And Becca has now died. Goodbye, Becca. I'm going to host this by myself now.
Okay, continue.
I always told myself I'd buy one doll and I'd be done, and if I bought any more dolls, they'd all be in the same range, which is also still hilarious. But we had finally gotten these. Becca sort of enabled me off of the jumping point of, Lindsay, this is the best thing you're going to get. It's the moon, but with elf ears. It has fucking elf ears. I'm like, all right, we'll go.
I thought she would like it better.
And she's not really wrong, but that never left me that the moon was what I was really after.
Yeah, and even just my husband said, nothing saying after you got this Karina, you could buy the other one too eventually.
Which is good of him. It's very good of him.
But anyway, your thing.
But my guilty thing, this has been hiding, literally this box has been hiding under my bed since I purchased it because I felt guilty about it because I don't have bodies for them technically.
Okay, here's the guilt.
Here's the guilt.
There's the door. Poof. Okay.
And then, now I can talk about it. But, so I found, after I jumped on these, because I didn't think I was going to find the real moon sculpts, I found someone selling.
Both of them? 2 of them. Did you get them from the same seller?
No.
Oh, okay.
Selling the moon heads. The paired heads that you got with the limited release, with the sleeping eyes, semi-closed, and the open eyes. And this light is a little bit yellow, so you can't tell, but they're very yellowed.
I mean...
They match... Well, they're actually a little bit more yellow than this, but even though they've been in a box forever.
I don't even know if I have... Okay, this is the closest thing I have to a white color just available. Yeah. Well, other than the table.
Not that we can really show you from... Because we're a mile away from the camera right now.
Yeah.
But just take it from me, they're fairly yellowed, but they're probably original, like from early release with the moon. And if I put them up next to each other...
They're pretty good at close and match.
They're very close, but they're not exactly the same, especially in the... You can tell they used a more free... Like, there's a slight shrunkeness to the details in the limited. Yeah. Where they clearly sculpted, like, took a pool from the original and then sculpted on it.
Yeah.
Because you can tell in the way the nose is, which is a whole thing, but you can tell 3 casts, blah, 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 blah. But it mattered enough to me that I have the heads.
Yeah.
Living underneath my bed.
And wasn't
without bodies.
Wasn't this guy originally a dreaming head and then the eyes opened a little?
Yeah, he was a dreaming head that was modified, which I actually like. They did a good job modding it, which means I don't have to be terrified about ruining something. I actually prefer buying mods than doing them. Go figure. But that's all part of the Grail thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite satisfied, and you're not quite satisfied.
Not yet.
And it's the unattainability that really puts Grail on a doll as opposed to a doll you want.
And then there's the question of if you get it and it is exactly what you want.
What do you do?
Because if it's exactly what you want and exactly how it's supposed to end up, what do you do next with that doll other than put it on the shelf?
Because once it's on the shelf, the hunt is over.
And there's no... Other than maybe taking it down to take some picture of it, unless you invest time in actually playing with the doll, there's nothing else there.
There's the investment of the process. And these boys will always be special to me, especially this one, because she was a pain in the butt to obtain because of miswritten zip codes, which required a lot of going back and forth. It's a great story. I'll tell it sometime. And the hunt made him special. And having them makes them special. And them being my first dolls, which I basically bought at the same time, not from the same place, makes them very special to me.
So,
but they still weren't this.
Yeah. So,
and I have these and I've never put bodies on them.
Yeah.
It is not hard to find a cheap delve body.
Well, I'm surprised you just haven't swapped these guys.
But that's also part of it too, isn't it?
Oh. You're attached to these guys now.
I like them. But I also, I still needed to have these, but I don't need them to be complete.
Maybe you can just get one of those, like, bust things and, like, paint them up.
I have, like, a vague dream about getting them onto a female body and having this cool hybrid thing, because I think the moon would make a really handsome woman. But that is my own problem.
Yes.
That's for another time. And what we're talking about is the Grail is about obsession.
The Grail is about obsession and unobtainability, either because of limitedness or because of your situation, either financially or otherwise. But
I think the bigger element of a Grail is that it's unobtainable through limitation.
Yes.
In terms of access to it, whatever it is. It's in a different country, and the speaking and like the ability to get the distribution just doesn't exist.
Right.
That it is unusual, that getting it is hard, that it requires kind of shenanigans to obtain.
Yeah, like if I were to tell you my other little Grail, you would just cry for me.
What's your other Grail? Okay, we have to be real here. What's your other Grail?
The original Machina.
Oh, Becca.
The molds are gone. I'm screwed.
Are those the molds that got destroyed in the fire?
I think so.
Oh no.
Yeah, no,
the molds don't even exist.
Yeah, no. So I kept wanting it, and I kept saying, no, don't even think about that one. That's impossible. It's gone.
But it's still a Grail.
I guess so.
Just like the Holy Grail.
It's physically probably unobtainable unless there's one person that decides for whatever ungodly reason that she wants to get rid of it and actually sells it for a price that isn't an insane markup.
Yes. And I think that's what's key to making something a Grail doll.
Yes. So, as always, if you want to talk to us about your Grail or what makes something a Grail to you,
or being disappointed with a Grail once you got it,
you can contact us. We have Twitter. We have Blogspot, Facebook, and
Gmail,
and of course our website. So our Gmail is
NingyoBINGO@gmail.com. That's I can never say it right because I want to spell it like the dog name.
NingyoBingo
@gmail.com. Our Twitter is at the exact same name, not with the email thing at the end, but with NingyoBINGO, which is NINGYO. I always want to drop the gosh darn Y. And BINGO.
And of course, our website, which connects all these things together, which you can find, is at NingyoBINGO.com. And of course, you can always find our podcast, which is where this all began, on iTunes. You can download the RSS feed for your favorite player, or Stitcher.
15 plus episodes at this point. So if you enjoyed hearing to us talk to each other and would prefer to do it perhaps in your car, or you're interested in topics such as what is the cycle of addiction that drives why we like this? What is up with Volks anyway? What happened between Cerberus Project and Delph? We like to talk about all sorts of topics that might be interesting to new and old hobbyists alike.
Yes. So remember, when you're seeing your new lovely Grail come up on Yahoo auctions for a price that wouldn't be exorbitant even with
the shipping
and the fees from the proxy.
Oh man.
Remember, keep on collecting dolls.
But keep a budget.